The Hull C. For those in the cargo hauling profession and obsession, this behemoth represents the beginning of truly dynamic trade. Touted as the most common ship in human space in Star Citizen lore, this gargantuan vessel pulled the human empire back from the brink of economic disaster. But can it pull back interest in trade, in a floundering excuse of an economy, and out of the proverbial toilet? And it's not just the traders that the Hull C's arrival is set to affect. As a vessel that is designed, both in gameplay and lore, to span the gap between trade hubs, moving commodities between and across multiple star systems, the Hull C will serve as yet another stark reminder of how small Stanton really is, and how many years it has remained, and potentially could remain so. Citizens, my name's Beard of Oz, and today I'll be talking about the elephant in my hangar, the MISC Hull C. I'll go over some key points about the ship itself, some of the challenges or disappointments we stand to see on its flyable launch, as well as some of my thoughts on what I'd like to see instituted short term while we watch the pond that is Stanton become that much smaller. If you enjoy this video or learn anything new, be sure to hit that like button, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. I've moved my streams from Twitch to YouTube, so if you're interested in joining me live and telling me I say Calliope incorrectly, be sure to hit that bell icon so you'll be notified when I'm about to go live. If you'd like to support the channel with the jingle jangle of coins from your pocket, I have memberships available for just $1, giving you access to some cool emotes and badges for chat. Speaking of members, I'd like to thank those that have hit that join button, with a special shout out to my most recent member, Wintry Spy 89. Alright, now that the housekeeping is out of the way, let's dive in. So, in case you missed it, the Hull C is back on the menu, with a recent ISC declaring it ready for release with Alpha 3.20, which has a Q3 timeframe. Allegedly. This massive hauler, brought to you by Musashi Industrial Starflight Concern, is the middle child in the Hull series. The Hull series of ships revolutionized cargo hauling in the verse by utilizing a collapsible spindle system that can be housed within the chassis when unused and unfurled and expanded when in use, allowing the ship to carry much more cargo externally than ships of a similar size can internally, essentially ponying up and carrying all 20 bags of groceries in one go. The Hull A, the only flyable hull currently in the PU, as you might be aware, carries 64 SCU of cargo externally, and while that may not seem like much when compared to many ships currently available, it's worth noting most ships in its physical size range don't have the fuel capacity for longer jaunts, especially for jumps between systems and then across the breadth of some of those distant regions. So, with the Hull A as a smaller piece of context, the Hull C, coming in at 125 meters long when collapsed, is similar in size to the Drake Caterpillar. The Caterpillar holds 576 SCU of cargo. The Hull C, however, once expanded, holds a whopping 4,608. As you've likely seen in the ISC, the Hull C holds these larger capacity cargo containers for both convenience of cargo transfer and also so the servers don't crash out like day one of Xenothreat. The ship's internals are nothing to sneeze at either, with enough space in the cockpit for a crew including an old wizard and a talking dog. On the label, the ship notes a crew of 2 to 4, but I'm sure I won't have any trouble running it solo, right? Right? That is, until engineering gameplay becomes incorporated into the PU, because then, when the doohickeys and the bell whoppers start their inevitable and untimely post-jump exit phase, I'll need to haul ass down this expanded internal walkway to the rear of the ship, where there are 3 levels to the engineering section, and I'll be damned if I'm going to remember my multi-tool on the frantic run down there. Meaning, unless the devs have been kind enough to put a sidearms weapon rack down there, I'm probably not going to have one on me. There's a crew living space for you to keep your friends or large collection of surfing picos, and I'm sure this time the kitchen has a coffee machine that actually works. I won't go into too much detail of the ship's specifications because when this monster finally reaches my eager hands, I'll be going over it in its own video. Now, when it comes to cargo hauling and trade as it is, it's certainly not in the best state. While it's true, mechanically it works, that's not to say that it's as organic or interesting as the economic systems in other space-related titles. Don't get me wrong, I love cargo hauling. I enjoy trying to find the best profit margin for a given commodity, and I even enjoy the traveling between locations to do it. However, As large as Stanton can feel at times, it is uncomfortably small at others. From the small range of commodities, and within that small range, an even smaller sub-range of commodities actually worth trading if you want to make more than proverbial cents on the hour, to the universal pool of available commodities across separate servers, causing most traders to either wait by a terminal hoping for the refresh tick to bring more cargo to their cavernous C2 hold, or start buying everything that a location has regardless of the margin. And I'm not knocking that form of trading either. Like I said, I love cargo hauling, and there are those that love hauling it more than I do, and they swear by never running your ship with empty slots. It's the lack of variation and variety that has started to wear on me, because the only real change we've seen lately is a minor shuffling of the deck when it came to commodities related to the mining update. And it only took a week of tweaks for some obvious money makers before the dust had settled and we were all stuck back into the usual lanes and matchups that were the best buy options. I miss the shift and shake of coming back to a trade route after only a few days to discover it's no longer the go and the new commodity on the block is all the rage. But that's the difference between those games and Star Citizen. Where in those other titles, trade spans many star systems and galaxies, trade in Star Citizen is all within one very small pond. It's like buying chickens from one farm and trying to sell them to the neighboring farm at a profit. Eventually it's just not going to work and you get tired of passing the same fence posts. Now we're all waiting on Pyro, not to mention the invisible Keebler elf NPCs known as Quanta that are supposedly going to bolster and add variety to this stagnant pool of fetid water that is Stanton. But while it's true I know very little, if not nothing, about game development, every time I hear the term NPC in relation to Star Citizen, I have horrific visions of the table dancing and moonwalking citizens of Stanton that can barely function in their menial life tasks, yet somehow have the audacity to flaunt their cool outfits that I can't for the life of me find in any stores. So the idea of resting my hopes and dreams of a brighter and better future for the economic variety and virility on these space wasters' invisible cousins is not a promising one. But I digress. The addition of the Hull C into a single system economy already has many a citizen scratching their head. We know that the ship with its spindle extended cannot land, so the surface of a planet or moon is out. That leaves us with the docking collars at orbital stations and Lagrange points, or the temporary solution currently planned of buying cargo with the ship collapsed or stored, exiting the station, then flying to a designated location to collect the cargo purchased, with a cargo loading timer involved. Which then leaves the travel to another station, the docking at a collar, the selling, and so the cycle continues. Which is fine, I guess. We don't know what kind of issues we might encounter in the steps of this process because, after all, Star Citizen is a big testing ground in which we are all its lab rats. But as it stands, there isn't much by way of variety and volume of cargo at these locations, and at no point in that ISC were we informed of any changes to the lineups of cargo available to buy and sell for this $400 pledge ship that's sole purpose is to buy, transport, and sell 4,608 SU of cargo. Speaking of that cargo, the larger cargo containers that the Hull C will be transporting will require the larger tractor beams to move, assuming we'll be able to detach them at the ship's arrival, and the roadmap currently states that vehicle tractor beams are progressing nicely, but no mention of whether or not they'll coincide with the MISC's flyable state. If vehicle tractor beams aren't game ready on release, will the Hull C even be piratable, or we will see a return of pre-3.18 extortion-based piracy? Alright. With that out of my system, I thought I'd share with you a couple of the solutions, at least short term, that I discussed on a live stream that I hope have already been set for implementation with the Hull C's release, and if they aren't, CIG is more than welcome to do so and claim them as their own. If you also have suggestions, feel free to drop them in the comments section below. I'll get an obvious one out of the way because the roadmap made mention of it, so I have a feeling this one is already in the works, though it doesn't sound like it's slated for 320, and that's the cargo missions. Worst case scenario, with the current economy setup, the implementation of cargo missions for vast quantities of a new mission-specific cargo, say vacuum-sealed stuffed Pico dolls, would at the very least allow the continuation of testing, both the Hull C's transportation of goods and the implementation of timers in alternative loading locations. Speaking of loading timers, I've heard a few conversations talking about trying to prioritize smaller vessels moving cargo from planet to station so the Hull C's can then move the cargo from those stations to the other, and while that's all well and good in a more realistic setting, we are currently not in a realistic setting. The lack of load times means that a smaller ship can make those interplanetary shipments themselves with no need to stop it off at a station. I personally, and I imagine there'll be some vocal detractors in the comments for this one, believe that cargo timers should be introduced for all ships buying and selling cargo at a terminal, as we're going to have to implement it eventually. Regardless of when you do, players are going to complain because they've gotten used to instantaneous magic cargo loading, so we might as well start ripping band-aids now. Another minor solution I had thought might be a possibility is expanding the roster of bulk cargo. Currently, we have scrap and waste, and that's about it. Why not shift to existing commodities that are low margin and could conceivably be bulk also? For example, foodstuffs and hydrogen. If all 4 planetary areas were the exclusive supplier of one of those bulk commodities, haulers in the Hull C could then transport said commodities to other locations. Here's a terrible picture I drew myself to explain. Similar to mining's redistribution of minerals, making these 4 bulk commodities exclusive to each planetary area would allow a bit of variety, as well as 2 possible options of destination, allowing the haulers to not be completing the exact same back and forth ping pong trade route. Ultimately, the lack of additional star systems is the major issue we'll see with larger vessels like the Hull C, as it was never intended for trade within a solitary environment of the economy. I hope I'm wrong, and that the vast majority of these concerns and issues are already being addressed for the release of 3.20 and the Hull C, but I have to admit, the more this draws out, the more concerned I've become. And as much as I hate taking a pessimistic stance, I'm not convinced this vessel will be released as soon as it's being claimed. I want it to be released, and I want to trade in it. But ultimately, if these glaring issues aren't addressed, I see the Hull C being just yet another large ship that looks amazing when parked next to other small ships, and not a great deal else. Either way, what do you think? Do you have the Hull C pledged? Are you eagerly anticipating its arrival? Let me know in the comments section below. If you made it to the end of this video and my unintended rant, I'd appreciate you hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. As I mentioned, I do have memberships available and I've moved my streams over to YouTube. Be sure to check out this video here. I've got some cool information you might like. Stay safe in the verse, and I'll catch you all next time.